I asked Thomas A. Edison to talk to me about inventions. And he did. Inventions now remake the world every 20 years. I wanted Edison's forecast of what inventions are coming next. I wanted his views instead of those of anyone else, because I believed he was likely to know more than anyone else. I recalled particularly a remark that he once made to me. "When I am trying to make a thing," he said, "I always play my blue chips first. I try to think of the biggest thing that could be done, and then do it." On my way to the laboratory, I had mapped out in my mind a list of questions that I wanted to ask. Edison did not wait to see the map. He knew what he wanted to discuss first. What he wanted to discuss first was money. Not silver, not banknotes, not government certificates. Gold. He believes gold will not much longer last. He holds these views because he believes it is only a question of time until a way will be discovered to manufacture gold. The discovery will surely be made sometime because the making of gold is a question only of the proper combination and treatment of matter. Perhaps radium has the power to convert a cheap metal into a dear one. Radium is a wonderful metal, he continued. We know next to nothing about it. The fact of its discovery was made known to us one morning in the newspapers. News of the discovery of some metal, even more wonderful, may come to us in the newspapers tomorrow morning. All over the world, scientists are working hard to try and find out the secrets of things. Every fact we find makes it easier to find the next fact. Nothing that is reasonable is impossible, and it is reasonable to expect that we shall find out how to make gold. This video has been sponsored by Babbel, the world's #1 language learning app. From China to Rome, Japan to the USA, Spain to Mexico, how did these different cultures connect? Well, they had translators, or just a very confusing time. But luckily, these days we have Babbel. Living in Spain, I've been a Babbel user for many years, and it has been a lifesaver. Gone are the days where I wish the ground to swallow me up in the supermarket. 15 hours of Babbel, for example, is equal to an entire semester of college language classes. And it's obviously loads easier, less hassle, and you can do it in your pajamas. It's great. Y por eso puedo hablar con la gente en la calle. Via app. So, if you guys want to be able to chat away in a different language, Babbel is the obvious place to start. Sign up on this link to get 50% off your first 6 months for a limited time only, and then we can speak Spanish together. Zanahoria. Thanks. Edison has very high regard for the Bumblebee as a flyer. He says its wings are exceedingly small in proportion to the size and weight of its body. It flies so well only because it uses its wings so well. Moreover, he believes we shall have to learn wisdom from the Bumblebee before we shall travel in the air very far, very fast, or very safely. He would apply the Bumblebee principle to lifting the flying machine, and the present propeller system to driving it ahead. In his opinion, flying machines should be able to go straight up. Aeroplanes can only go up as they go ahead. Suppose you had 4 million trained bumblebees, he said, attached to wire wickerwork on which was seated a man. Can't you understand that if the bumblebees were signalled to fly, they would lift the man? I believe mechanical bumblebees could be attached to a flying machine that they would lift it straight up. By mechanical bumblebees, I mean inclined planes revolving upon perpendicular shafts at tremendous speeds. Once in the air, ordinary propellers could be used to drive the machine ahead. Edison believes that the present type of aeroplanes will soon be discarded, and that bumblebee flyers will carry passengers at a rate of 100 miles an hour or more. Meanwhile, transportation upon land, he declares, will be revolutionized. The steam locomotive is blowing its last blast for millions of people. The next generation of New Yorkers and New Englanders will first hear at school of steam locomotives. and never will see them unless they go to some state that has neither much water power nor much population. Water wheels will make electricity to run all the railroads that traverse regions in which there is abundant water power. Whole systems, like the Great Northern, will be thus operated. In densely populated states, electric locomotives will displace steam, regardless of whether water power is available. Yet the changes Edison foresees in the methods of transportation are less radical than the changes he foresees in the use of iron and steel. Steel, he says, is destined soon to fall from its high pinnacle as the skeleton of skyscrapers, to become the material of which furniture is made of. Book covers may also be made of steel. Even the pages of books may be made of steel, though Edison regards nickel as a better substitute for paper. Here, indeed, is a case where the small end of a subject is the big end. The imagination is not much taxed by the suggestion of skyscrapers being made without steel, but nickel books bound by steel. "Why not?" asked Edison. "Nickel will absorb printers' ink. A sheet of nickel 1/20,000th of an inch thick is cheaper, tougher, and more flexible than an ordinary sheet of book paper. A nickel book 2 inches thick would contain 40,000 pages. Such a book would weigh only a pound. I can make a pound of nickel sheets for $1.25. "All furniture will soon be made of steel," said Edison. "The steel required for a given piece of furniture costs only 1/5 as much as the wood would cost for the same piece of furniture. And polished steel takes a beautiful finish. It can be stained in perfect imitation of mahogany, walnut, cherry, maple, oak, or any other wood. The babies of the next generation will sit in steel high chairs and eat from steel tables. They will not know what wooden furniture is. Men who put up wooden structures are worse lunatics. It is because we use such building materials that the fire losses in this country amount to almost $500 million a year." Edison had a good deal to do with the bringing out of the telephone. Perhaps he could conceive of something better than the telephone, something better than the telegraph, better than the Marconi wireless, something that would utilize a new form of which mankind is not yet conscious. He could conceive of such a force. "So far as I know," said he, "there is no quality of the ether that will permit us to send wave impulses in other than the electrical form, but I have no doubt that wave impulses can be sent in other and perhaps better forms. I do know, however, that the present telephone is very imperfect. If you want to know how imperfect it is, read the drug market to a stenographer at the other end of the wire and see how much of it she will get. The success of the telephone is due to human imagination. A man is rung up on the phone. He gets a clue to the identity of the person who is calling him, and if the subject breached is one with which he is familiar, the rest is easy. But mention a name that the other man did not expect to hear, and see how quickly he will break in with a "What's that?" Repeat that name, and finally, spell it. Edison believes that the day will come when the telephone will leave little to nothing to the imagination, when it will shout out proper names or whisper the quotations from the drug market. Edison calls the brain a meat machine, a machine made of meat. He says that the next generation will see metal machinery that, in wonderfulness of performance, will almost rival the brain itself. Cloth, buttons, thread, tissue paper, and pasteboard will be fed into one end of the machine, and suits of clothing, packed in boxes, will come out the other. Bound books will fall from the press. The machine that takes in lumber will give out finished furniture. In other words, machinery will make the parts of things and put them together, instead of merely making the parts of things for human hands to put together. "Invention is in its infancy," said Edison. "Infants have to creep before they can walk." Inventors had to begin by inventing machinery to make only the parts of things. but the time has now come to take the next step and invent machinery that will not only make the parts, but put the parts together. The day of the seamstress wearily running her seam is almost ended. There is no reason why women should be made to do what machinery can do better. Human labour is slow and expensive even when it is applied to machinery and making the parts of things. Machine labour is cheap because its product is so enormous in quantity. Many years will not pass before machinery will make clothing so cheap that anyone can afford to have 4 or 5 suits of clothes a year. Edison believes that the present type of farmers and the present methods of farming are destined to disappear, that in place of the present farmer will come a shrewd businessman. "I think the coming farmer," said Edison, "will be a man on a seat beside a push-button and some levers." The present trend all point to this conclusion. We are making wonderful headway. 20 years ago, we knew almost nothing about scientific agriculture. Edison believes that the piling up of armaments will bring universal revolution or universal peace before there can be more than one more great war. Working men, he says, will not much longer stand to be taxed to create great and still greater armies and navies. If governments don't heed, governments will be destroyed by their own people. In his opinion, governments will heed by making the Hague Tribunal the Supreme Court of the world. "I believe," said he, "that all England will someday stop at the sound of one command, and that, the command of a working man." "There will be no poverty in the world 100 years from now," said Edison. "There is no limit to the cheapness with which things can be made. The world will soon be flooded with the cheap products of machinery, not the poor products, the cheap products." "Why should we expect poverty to continue?" asked Edison. "Poverty was for a world that used only its hands. When men used nothing but their hands, poverty was most intense. Now that men have begun to use their brains, poverty is decreasing. Poverty is decreasing though we have been only using our brains a little while. Think how long the world has stood, and then recall that practically everything we know today that is worthwhile we have learned within 100 years. Look about you and see how many things that were worthwhile were known 100 years ago." The world flooded with food, clothing, shelter and luxuries. What good would it do the people of the world if a few men should own all these things? Edison had thought of that. He realizes the size of the problem, but he says it is a problem in the solving of which neither he nor his kind can help. Inventors can make the world rich. Only the people can provide the governmental means for keeping the riches they make. He believes the people are going to provide these means. He believes there are stormy days ahead for the man who would take what another makes. He believes there will be cracks in the walls of government and rips in constitutions, that the working man, the man who will someday say to England, "Stand still," will compel governments to serve him and destroy any government that will not serve him. Moreover, he believes things ought to be changed. Civilization, he says, is not on the right basis. A few are getting too much, and the rest not enough. There will be some big experiments tried in government within the next 50 years.